Walter, thank you so much for
My
spending
pleasure.
this time
Yes.
with us.
Sure.
And welcome in Geneva.
Thank you. Great to be back.
You did so many great, outstanding movies, got 3 Oscars, and have a wonderful career to follow. And what brought you to this movie, Particle Fever?
What could be better than working on something like this? No, I've had a lifelong interest in science. At night, when to send myself to sleep, I read books on science. And I've known Mark for, I don't know, 25, 30, almost 30 years. And we met while I was editing Unbearable Lightness of Being. Mark had graduated with a PhD in particle physics from Berkeley, which is where I was working, and he was hanging out at the film center because that intrigued him as well. And I knew there was somebody in the building who might know something about string theory, and I tracked him down and took him out to lunch, and that started a friendship that continued to this day.
Fantastic. So, Walter, the question of who we are and why we are here in our existence is interesting for everybody. But this movie also raises the question of where we are.
Yes, I mean, what happens here at physics, what happens here in physics at CERN is, a very deep examination of the material structure of the universe, going back as far as we can get to as close to the Big Bang as possible, with the understanding and the hope that the more we understand about the material structure, the better basis we will have to understand other things. Like, what will I have for breakfast 10 years from now? But some of those questions are, posed by people like Shiva that deal with things other than the material structure. But here is the sort of the Vatican of material sciences here.
And you feel very comfortable, Mark?
Feel very comfortable.
With your background?
Oh, yeah, with tackling the subject for sure. I mean, I think, when I moved into filmmaking, I mean, one of the things I was always very much conscious of the fact that there were certain similarities in the goals of filmmaking or art and science in terms of representing the world. And I had always thought that maybe I would do a film, but since I was in the fiction world, I thought I'd probably write a script that somehow dealt with this. And then when I heard about this project, it was the perfect thing. And this was something that, the origin of the project was actually with my partner, David Kaplan. So David is a theorist, and he had this idea that what was going to happen at the LHC could make a dramatic film. And when I heard about the fact that he was trying to do this, I contacted him and talked about the fact that I was not interested in doing a typical sort of informational documentary, but if we could do something that used the skills that I had been developing in narrative filmmaking to tell a story that was dramatic and could reach a wider public, that would be a very much of interest, and that's what he wanted as well. And so it is ironic that it ended up being a documentary is the thing that perfectly combined it. But the great advantage for me was that from the point at which I met David and agreed that we were agreed to go forward, I didn't have to learn about the physics. I think for most filmmakers, if they were going to do this, I mean that could have been to get a PhD would have taken them years, and prep the experiment would have been finished, and I could really just jump in and focus on the filmmaking, and that's the way I approached it, and just from the beginning thinking, how are we going to tell a really great story? Mm-hmm. And Walter also had not done a documentary, and so once it got to the editing, we approached it the way we would approach any film. I mean, it was like, okay, we talked in terms of the drama, the characters, and in fact, it was the science that we put in at the end you know, when we realized where things needed to be done, but it was always a consideration of how we are going to tell this as just as a great story.
Because this is the only documentary you edited?
Yes, I had edited short documentaries early in my career, and then I plunged into fictional film. And you know, there are things like the middle of Unbearable Lightness has a documentary section, but no, this was the first feature documentary that I had worked on.
Fabulous. And how did you get together?
Well, so as Walter said, we met, you know, over 25 years ago, and it was actually because of physics. I mean, I was sort of trying to get into to film, and I was coming in through the editing room, and Walter was just interested and fascinated by anybody that he could talk to physics about, who wouldn't just turn away from him. And so we spoke, we met, and you know, discovered a common interest in art and in science, and then we developed a professional relationship, and we worked together on An English Patient, Talented Mr. Ripley, Cold Mountain, K-19. So you know, we had a working relationship because my day job, while I was I made one film, was writing other scripts, was working in sound post-production. I had a specialty in something called ADR, where I worked with actors in post-production, and had the great advantage that we worked with a couple directors, in particular Anthony Minghella, who saw ADR as his last chance to do a rewrite, so I got very involved in the editing room. And so I would come on early and have a very close working relationship with Walter as the film was actually coming together. And so, you know, I had lived in the Bay Area at the time. I moved to New York, but I would keep Walter posted on, you know, what was happening, the endlessness of it, you know, the fact that he had, you know, done a complete other film from beginning to end while I was still not even sure we were going to have an end to our film, and you know, Walter would send me these great little, you know, bits of encouragement and you know, keep going, keep going, Mark, you know, it's a good thing, and I, you know, at a certain point had an assembly together that I sent to him just to get his reaction, and it was extremely enthusiastic and again encouraging. You know, this is great. You know, it's going to be a great film. Don't give up. You know, keep going. And then I, you know, sort of started thinking, well, how great do you think it could be? Could you make it greater? And would you be willing to come to New York for what at that point we thought was maybe 3 months to sort of pull it all together? At that point, they had hints of the Higgs, but did not have, you know, it was not really accepted statistically as a discovery. And it worked out. I don't know if you were completely shocked. When we first spoke, did you ever think, maybe I could work on it? Or was it, when I first said, would you think about coming, was that like the first that?
No, I mean, that emerged very naturally.
Yeah.
Plus, I was, you know, my life as a freelance editor is always very uncertain. I know maybe 6 weeks or a few months ahead of time what I'm doing, and a project that I was supposed to be working on had collapsed because of the economic conditions of the time, so I was free, and you know, 3 months was just long enough.
Just long enough to make a financial killing on this big documentary. Yes. So you know, it came about pretty quickly, actually, and we started working on it, and you know, Walter started massaging it immediately, you know, throwing out certain stories, you know, because we knew we needed to cut it down. But then, you know, we started hearing things about the real discovery. And, you know, it was actually quite interesting because there was supposed to be a big conference in Australia on July 4th in 2012. But there were no hints that there was going to be anything specifically new. We thought it was maybe a little bit more refinement of the data. And I actually wasn't even going to go to cover it. I knew people going. Fabiola was going to give a talk, so I had asked friends who were going to go anyways as part of the collaboration, you know, if you can film her give her talk, maybe there's something interesting. And about 2 weeks before, we heard I saw there was an internal memo from CERN where the Director General said that there was going to be a special seminar at CERN on the morning of July 4th, 2012.
The rumors.
Well, there was going to be a seminar here that would, in some sense, we thought, well, that's going to preempt what's going on in Australia. That's a little odd. And so I wrote to Fabiola and I said, where are you going to be? Are you going to give the talk now in Geneva on the 4th, or are you going to go to Australia? And she just wrote back, I'm going to be in Geneva. And then it was like, okay, this is serious. And so immediately, I mean, it was within a week, I think I had to book a ticket, flew over here, and then, of course, there was a huge announcement, and then, you know, we had to deal with it. And so suddenly, that was in July, and, you know, now Walter had all this new material, and we had a result that was unexpected with interesting consequences, and it took another year, basically, to integrate that footage, to go back and, you know, make sure that the film actually supported what the end was so that people could understand what the significance was, you know.
What was your greatest challenge while editing this movie?
I think, and this was fairly clear to me early on, was to visceralize the subject matter, which left to itself tends to devolve into people staring at computer screens. So out of the 500 hours of material, to find a way to make the right choices and to make the right structure of sequences of scenes so that an audience doesn't get lost in the subject matter, but also that they have an emotional feeling toward it. I was reading a review from Spain just the other day of Particle Fever, and the writer said, I only understood half the physics, but then I found myself crying at the end of the movie. You know, so that was kind of the goal, that the visceralization is what makes you have an emotional reaction to it.
Yeah, it's a full success.
Well, yeah, that's great. I mean, and I think, you know, the key to that is the characters, you know, that we really, you know, knew from the beginning we were going to focus on the characters, and you identify with them, and I think people see them as very human, because it's fascinating that people do cry at the end, and they may not even understand the details. So what is it? What are they crying for? You know, they're crying because they are happy, you know, for these people.
Well, it's also an optimistic view of what human beings can achieve together. Yes. From all different cultures working in this environment. Certainly when you look at other things in the news today, it's all drifting in the other direction. So this is an island of hope. And when you combine that with people who on screen are very captivating and interesting and obviously very knowledgeable about the subject matter, it's an intoxicating cocktail of subject matter and images and sounds, music too.
I mean, and you know, there's been many instances where people have told me, you know, that you know, they see these scenes. There's one in particular people always talk about where Nimar Khani Hamed is just at the blackboard, like, and they say, I don't understand anything that he's putting on the board, but it makes me so proud that somebody does, you know, that I'm part of the same, you know, species that has come up with this. And somebody said it's aspirational. And I guess in some sense that was always the hope, you know, that would be the case, but it has resonated in a way that completely almost exceeds my hopes in terms of, you know, a general audience, that they see that. I'd say that was really one of the fundamental goals of the film, I think, is to, you know, get people excited, to show it. I know from David's perspective, it was to show, you know, what it's really like, and to you know, really do something authentic. And I think if there was a summary of sort of the one thing I would hope people would get from this film is the value of this, the necessity of being supportive of endeavors that may not have the most direct, clearly practical application, but it's the things that we have to do as humans that distinguishes us as humans. To understand, we have this curiosity, as Sava says in the film, and we need to fill it somehow, and we have to support people who have the ability to expand our frontiers.
Yeah, there is no military application, but on the other hand, in the movie it is mentioned also, we don't know yet.
Right.
Because when they discovered radio waves, there were no transistors, no radio to listen to. So we don't know yet, but it's absolutely necessary to favor the working together of 100 nationalities.
Right.
It's fascinating.
I mean, especially in these days, I mean, where I think we see so much, partisanship, and divisiveness, and people, using their differences in a very tragic way, and to have something here where all these people that actually even right now are fighting each other, sometimes with guns, but here, that's not the consideration. You work with the best people, and you have a common goal, and it's hard to, it's hard to beat.
Well, that's also, we're celebrating here the CERN's 60th anniversary, and it was founded upon the ruins of the Second World War as a way of bringing warring nations together, exactly as Mark said, for this common goal, which is still happening, unfortunately.
Yeah, one ideal to reach for can put together all energies and give a much better perspective for the young people than engaging into military actions or whatever.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, I can't even think of any other example of something that combines so many people, from so many countries in an endeavor like this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you read about cathedral builders, it was similar. The people, the experts who built cathedrals, which was cutting-edge science in a sense, architecture, doing something that had never been done before. There were thousands of people who came from all over Europe to a site to build one of these cathedrals, and so it was a mix of nations.
A mix of nations, but I don't know that it was so much of an immediate mix of people that were battling each other. I mean, I actually met somebody who had been at CERN when it was founded. Actually, he was one of the first people here, and he said that it was very strange feeling at first. They were actually he said there were just a couple of trailers. Actually, nobody had any idea it was going to turn into this world-class. But he said it was strange. Suddenly you were supposed to be working with somebody who you really were an enemy of and had been shooting at you not so recently. I mean, rather recently. That's pretty unique, and even here, I mean, we're interviewing. There was a theorist from Soviet Georgia, while at the same time that Russia was coming in, and there were Russians there as well. But you focused on the physics, and that was a higher goal.
Yeah. And bringing a lot of things, the internet was invented here.
It was. So there are practical applications, but they were auxiliary and sort of ancillary.
The World Wide Web.
The World Wide Web, right? Not the internet, but and already from the research for the LHC, there's already been developments in optics and in computer science, in the web,
medicine,
in imaging technology, in material science. But I think what is also true is, the analogy that Walter makes with cathedral building is, in some sense, it is they have constructed a cathedral of science. Absolutely. That's and of course they didn't do it for aesthetic reasons, designed it that way. But it's very interesting that it came out that way.
It's so beautiful.
That it's so beautiful, and the symmetry of the experiment, has reasons physics-wise that appeals to us also visually, artistically. For everybody to know, it really is here at CERN, because I think a lot of people watch the film and they think that, I just shot that somewhere else and we stuck it in. The fact is, it's right here. And from the very first time I came here, I saw it and just thought, this is very unusual. It's not what people would mostly expect at a big research science institute, that there'd be something that is, obviously has a certain more spiritual side to it. And so I would shoot it at various times, had no idea how or where it would ever come into the film. And Walter was fascinated by it as well. He also developed this symbol. And so another example, the symbol for the standard model particle physics, this did not exist in the physics community. They always had things that were like, you know, graphs and the squares, and the Higgs didn't fit in there. And Walter became very obsessed with the idea that we need something that has a nice symmetry, that people can understand, that put the Higgs at the center of it. And so he actually came up with this image. And then, you know, had this great way of combining it with Shiva and
the destroyer.
And that only really emerged right at the end when they found where the Higgs actually ended up and found that it's at this very interesting critical place. And that was just, I mean, it was really one of the last things that came together. Then, I remember the first time Walter showed that to me, you know, he had just juxtaposed it, and it was just like, oh my gosh, this is just fantastic.
In the movie, a major moment to see the Higgs in the center.
Right.
Right.
But that only could come out at the very end when they had the results.
And because of the circularity
because
of
the
this
circularity of that as well.
The two things merge.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful line from Godard talking about editing, where he says, editing is the transformation of chance into destiny. And, you know, the fact that Mark shot this at all, and when it was off axis, really, for CERN, and then that I was dissatisfied with the square and came up with this, and then
and the Higgs ended up in a place that you know, made this more relevant.
Lorsqu'on raconte l'histoire de l'univers, on part d'une soupe de particules quasiment informes, indifférenciées, et petit à petit, on voit cette soupe se constituer en assemblage, émerger de là des structures de plus en plus compliquées, jusqu'à former des étoiles, des galaxies, et éventuellement de la chimie, jusqu'à former des espèces vivantes, y compris nous.
Donc la question c'est, comment est-ce qu'on fait pour connaître ce qui s'est passé dans les milliers d'années qui ont précédé?
Notre compréhension de l'univers repose donc sur ce qu'on sait de ce qu'il contient au niveau constituants fondamentaux et ce qu'on sait de comment ils interagissent.
La matière, c'est beaucoup plus mystérieux que ce que l'on peut croire. On a l'impression que la matière autour de nous, c'est quelque chose de stable, d'éternel. Ce n'est pas le cas. La matière a une histoire, l'univers a une histoire. Donc, nous, ce qu'on fait, en fait, dans nos recherches, c'est l'étude de l'histoire de la matière, en fait. Et les découvertes qu'on a fait récemment au CERN concernent cette histoire de la matière, l'histoire de l'univers et l'histoire de la matière.